All right, thanks everybody and welcome to our meeting this evening, Wednesday, May 22nd for the Watershed Erosion Task Force. I don't have too much to add here to start the meeting. I know we've got a lot of fun, hopefully some fun updates and things. So we'll just get kind of right down to it. The first thing anybody would be interested would be approving the minutes from our February 21st meeting, also our March 13th, 14th, and 18th closed sessions. And for those of you that are maybe watching, those were what would we call those? Interviews for consultant interviews. So those were closed, but they were super exciting.
Can we do a quick roll call?
Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's do a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Edens.
Here.
Member Bartlesmeyer, Member Delante. Here. Member Oaks.
Here.
Member Sturman.
Here.
Member Berger. Member Patton.
Here.
Member Scher.
Here, online.
And Member Donaldson and Chair Farmer.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see anybody that watching, right? So I don't think we have any public comment. We don't have anybody in the room. So you guys, I assume you want me to read this red notice, Joe? Is that?
We're going to jump back to the minute approval.
Oh yeah, minute approval.
Motion to
Yeah, that's right.
approve.
Motion to approve the minutes by Ms. Edens. Anybody here?
Second.
Mr. Sturman? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? All right, minutes are approved. Public comment, no remarks, we got a roll call, we're in business.
Well, with the chair's permission.
Sure.
Could I just do a couple of introductory remarks and then a request?
Yep.
First of all, Mr. Oaks is new, so we'd like to welcome him.
Welcome.
Yeah. If you'd like to just give a brief of how long you lived in Wildwood, where you live, something like that.
Well, we live at, on an Indian Tree subdivision. And, we've lived there for 35 years now, 36 years.
Long time.
So long time, yeah. Yeah, we've seen a lot of changes here in Wildwood, so. This is just one more. Hopefully it'll shore things up a little bit, and we won't have to be walking and walking.
Sounds good. And then we have a new council liaison, so to speak.
Oh, still here.
Been around.
So, and then with the permission of the chair and motion second and voice vote, could we rearrange the agenda to do the closed session last?
Sure.
That way, when we're done with the closed session, we can, come back in and adjourn and go.
Sure. Would anybody care to make the motion to adjourn? Lauren? Mr. Sturman, second. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, closed session will go last.
And then just a couple of other things. Mr. Delante had reminded me of my promise regarding donuts. So there's donuts and coffee tonight, so please help yourself. And then on the screen, we also have Melanie Ripito, the Assistant Director of the Department of Planning and Parks, and Brendan Marr, our new project manager, as well as our City Administrator, Tom Lee. So I think I've done all the introductions and the new faces. So welcome to everybody. And we do appreciate you coming in on such short notice. As you know, we did the interviews back in March, so I was hoping to get some momentum back behind the process. The first item on tonight's agenda is the detention retention basin studies that are being conducted by two consultants, Joe Wilson with Wilson Hydro, and then Todd Wagner with Wagner and Associates. Assisting them has been Doring Engineering, their survey crew. The 7 basins that were selected, the engineers needed more precise information about elevations and locations of the improvements in the basins and then the basins themselves. Tonight, what you have attached to the memorandum from the department is the first of what will be 7 reports. These 7 reports will basically analyze the basins that have been selected based upon a criteria the task force worked through with the consultants many months ago. And those basins will be determined if they're suitable for retrofit or not. And if they are suitable to be retrofit, what are the steps that need to be taken to ensure that they're according to all the requirements of the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, and equally important, if not more important, safe for the surrounding residents. The first basin that Mr. Wagner and Mr. Wilson did was the larger basin, the lake, West Glen Farms. And that was intentional because it is the largest of the 7 basins. It probably presents either the greatest opportunity or the greatest risk in terms of just not functioning for us. The report format is being presented to you tonight for discussion, as well as any of the thoughts you have about the report itself. I wasn't necessarily going to spend a great deal of time going through the logistics because I think that's what Mr. Wilson and Mr. Wagner will do at our next meeting. But I just wanted to get your impressions of, is this what you were expecting? Is it not? Do you like the format? Is it easy to understand from a layperson's terms? And then anything else you'd like to add? That information is being awaited upon by Mr. Wilson and Mr. Wagner. And once I have that, we'll get them along the way and then they'll finalize a format. And then the remaining reports that you will see will follow that format as well as this. I can't necessarily not go on without saying, this is a great basin. It works really, really well for a retrofit based upon the initial engineering done by the 2 consultants. And that's great news because it's at a critical location in the watershed. It's about mid-range. Catches water from basically everywhere, kind of, let's say, from West Glen Farms Drive south. And will hold water in the most stressed portion, hold water above the most stressed portion of the main channel. And that's from like generally Strecker Road, Big Road. So the first one out of the box has been a real winner, I think, for us. So Mr. Chair, that's really, I just want to make sure we're going in the right direction. And before we have finished the other reports, questions or comments, we have a whole bunch of people here to help. That may be inclusive of Mr. Marr, Ms. Ripito, Mr. Newberry, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Lee and myself. Thank you.
Joe, a question, so I understand. What we're looking at here, what was sent out in the email, then you don't want to have comments on that tonight. You're really looking for comments on the format?
Format and just initial impressions. Is this a good format? Is there things that could be reordered in association with it? And then obviously, if you know anything about the engineering, the models, if you see something that's awry, this would be a great time to let us know so we can fix it.
Please.
Yep, 2 questions. I thought the formatting was just fine. From my non-engineering background, I felt that I could understand it adequately. Just for my general knowledge, when we are retrofitting, are we using any of the capping that is similar to what was done by Dr. Hammer and that technology and Windcrest? Are in terms of the pipes? So I understand how that we're building up the basins, expanding them, they're gonna hold more volume, but is what's affecting the actual flow similar to that?
Like in the Windcrest subdivision, which is located on Clayton Road, east of Strecker Road, we were able to kind of begin the stormwater management planning very, very early on in that process. And for the most part, I like to think that in certain instances, the first section of Windcrest, we actually designed around the stormwater. And I think in this particular instance, and again, when Mr. Wagner and Mr. Wilson at our next meeting presenting, that'll be a great question for them. But I think what we're dealing with here is we have to design about the homes that surround the basins and ensure we don't do anything that would, for all intents and purposes, create an issue. Also, there's a substantial difference between what was done in Windcrest in the late 1990s and now with MSD regulations and standards. And so they've gotten so much better. I think if we just were successful with MSD, I think we'll be successful not only in addressing our concerns about the basin's function and improved function, but also just all those safety issues as well. Good question. And you'll probably get a much, much better answer from the experts.
Mr. Sturman?
Yeah, if this was an attachment in the email, I missed this part. It was all I don't know, was this all attached?
Mhm.
Oh, it was, I'm sorry, I missed, so I'm playing a little catch up here. So then you mentioned when the engineers come back, are they going to then add more dimensions and or more detail to what work they would propose to do?
This is pretty comprehensive from my first review, and I would
Okay.
defer to Mr.
I haven't looked at I may be, excuse me, then if I haven't.
No, that's fine. Like I say, there's a lot of,
Is there some of this in the backup here that applies to it, that more detail then? In,
backup is the models, the results of the modeling, and then there
Okay.
are mathematical analyses and things along those lines. Those, basically the attachments supports the conclusions and then the recommendations. But within the context, there's very specific items are relative to what they are recommending in terms of the retrofit of this particular structure.
I've just got some more reading and study to do.
And that's perfect, because tonight, again, the intent wasn't to say, let's go ahead and do this. It's really just making sure that we're on the right, we've chosen the right path. And the path we've chosen in terms of the format is one that you all believe successful in conveying what we need to do.
Mr. Oaks.
Yeah.
No, I'm
Right for you. You've got seniority, so, you know.
I'm a senior, all right. About that.
From the standpoint of, I don't know if it's format or not, but it assumes that there are these, what is it, 7 sites for retrofit. But I didn't notice anything or any part of the report that talked about how they determined what those priorities are. For example, are there any of them that are problem areas that, and if so, how can you tell it's a problem area? Is there a lot of overflow there or what? What I got from reading this was that West Glen Farms was in a unique position for being treated, but there wasn't any indication that it was a real problem area.
And excellent observation. So, and this is the fault of the department and the director of the department. There was a lengthy study that was conducted by the same 2 consultants in conjunction with the task force. And this is probably a year or more. And we'll get that to you, Mr. Oaks. We'll actually get you a whole bunch of information between now and the next meeting. But what the 2 consultants did is we asked them to look at the over 100 plus basins that are part of the Cox Creek watershed, and then select those basins they feel have the greatest chance of being able to be retrofit and actually control the flow of water upstream more than downstream. And so they did an analysis. There's photographs, there's graphs, there's words, there's tables, all these things that went into the process to ultimately define those 7 basins for working. So I'll get that to you, and I apologize.
Great, so it's that spade work has been done. And it's not necessarily that these are problem areas, but they're the areas that could give us the greatest benefit.
So from my perspective, and Mr. Farmer, please correct me, this is in your backyard, so to speak, but from West Glen Farms south or upstream, it's higher in the watershed and relatively speaking, some of the newer development. From West Glen Farms north, it's the middle to lower reaches, and that's where we have the most stress. And that's where we're seeing the greatest amount of erosion. And other than a couple of areas, that's where all of our critical projects are located. So what the logic was, and this was borne out by the consultants, if we hold more water upstream and detain it for a longer period of time under a better controlled release rate, we'll have less stress in the middle and lower reaches of the mainline channel. And that's the goal. Now, we have this USGS study that's actually looking at where else we could create new storage beyond what we already have. So the idea is to capture as much water as soon as we can, hold it as long as we can, and try to address those, I guess, what are they, short duration, high intensity storms, Rick, or something like that.
You're trying to hold back the storm, hold back more of the storm in the basin to reduce the flow downstream, to reduce the flow and the impact on the channel and the erosion and the potential for flooding. So, it's a proven methodology that's been done elsewhere. And, if we can find more than one to do it on here, it would be very helpful.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Process wise, this picture is the $250,000 piece, is that correct?
Actually, the $250,000 piece is the design and engineering for our two critical projects, that being the Highlands at Wild Horse and Evergreen Forest Court. And then whatever's left over, so to speak, from that design and engineering to basically begin our stormwater management master plan process.
Second part of the question. Then, if we believe that this format is okay and that they have done good work and our engineer says, looks like a pretty good thing, and our director of planning thinks the same, then what is the next step for Wagner, et cetera?
They are producing the next 6 reports. So they've not stopped. They are doing the modeling. They are doing the analysis from the models that have been completed.
Just for those 2 areas,
All 6.
for all 6, okay.
All 6 basins. So the next step in my mind is if the format's okay and you believe the logic behind the modeling and all the analysis that's been completed, they'll be presenting to us at least half, if not all, of the basins at the next meeting. And then they'll go through the steps. And then more importantly to me, they'll tell you what they think are let's say the top basins we need to start with to have the greatest impact in the shortest period of time, and then go from there.
So I think you might be asking, so the 248,400 that's in here.
Yeah,
So that is.
that's an approved amount already.
No, well, so we approved 250,000. That was for the 2 projects that we are working.
Okay,
What we've approved for these are the process to figure out if we should be doing these. And then once they bring them to us, then we would have another approval process to say, yes, we think that $250,000 is appropriate to spend
Okay.
there. We don't have that stuff in the budget at the moment, so we'll move those things
the work
forward.
that they have done already is paid for?
A lot of it, yeah.
I mean, generally speaking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the planning and all the surveying, all that
Okay.
kind of stuff, yeah. Anybody have anything else? Yes, sir.
And the $250,000 in here, though, is for West Glen Farms.
That's how I'm reading it. It's on page, I don't know if you got it in front of you, Joe. It's page 22, part 7.
Yeah, so what you'll see too in the reports is their estimate of the cost of the retrofit. And ultimately, we'll have to prioritize because quite frankly, we just don't have an unlimited source of funds. So their charge was not only to analyze and recommend, but also to provide a cost estimate. The reason being is surprisingly, it's about the start of June, but the city will start its budgeting process for 2025 in September. And Tom will be leading that. And as part of that with Ms. Edens, Mr. Farmer, we'll all be advocating for additional funds for 2025 to basically further the stormwater management master plan. And hopefully, if we can do 1 or 2 basins, 3 basins, that's great. It all depends. Once we get the estimates, cost estimates, it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. How can we spend our money the best and spread it and do as much of it as we can?
And so there's a couple of other things that aren't 100% yet that will happen, we hope, that will maybe help with some of this. So our political consultant in Jeff City has been working to get some state money for us. So last year, he was able to get in the budget $500,000. Unfortunately, the governor line item that at the last minute, so we didn't wind up getting it. We've now gone back to them this year for 350, I think, right?
That's correct.
So 350,000, we're hopeful when the state budget gets approved, that will come our way.
Which is,
It's gotten approved, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
It has gotten approved by the state house, state senate without a match. We originally were willing to match 40% of that, and that would come out of the 250 that we had already budgeted, so. If the governor signs the budget as is and doesn't do a line item veto on our appropriation, then we will get 350,000 for these projects, well, specifically for the Highlands and the Evergreen projects specifically. But other than that, the last year, the governor's office did line item veto it, so I don't want to get everyone's hopes up too much because there is a chance he could do the very same thing this year with it being his last year in office as well.
what's that timeline?
He can sign it, the bills have all been passed, that being said, he has, I believe, 40 days to sign it after all the bill, after the
So it's
passage of the
imminent.
bill. Yeah, he has to make a decision one way or the other, and if it doesn't get signed, it will pass without the line item vetoes. Last year, though, it was pretty sweeping and they waited to the last minute.
Like the last
That's part two to that.
Yeah, so the other part of that, if I'm remembering right, is the MSD stuff passed, right?
Yep.
So in theory, again, we don't know yet. The stuff that passed here with MSD in April would basically give the city, we think, what was it, like 300 grand, is that right?
They're true to 300 grand.
Yeah, but we're not quite sure how the math works yet, but MSD as part of everybody's basically sewer bills going up are going to start distributing money to municipalities to be able to do work in those municipalities rather than them kind of holding all of that on. Which is a good thing,
Very good thing.
assuming it actually comes through.
Is that an application process or do we know?
Well, I talked to Jeff Rippey, who was the young gentleman that used to attend our meetings regularly and represent MSD. And he explained to me that they're still working out the logistics. He thinks that there's at least 2 projects in the city of Wildwood that are already on the list. And remember, we've been collecting properties and adding them to the list and sending them the list in not necessarily a periodic process, but so he promised to get that information to me. I haven't received it yet. But at least 2 projects that he knows about are on that list of future funding. At least that's what he.
Yeah, and that's separate though from the other stuff, because doesn't that money just come to us
Yes.
anyways?
And again, if the funding from the state legislature survives the governor's veto, then obviously we'll use that because that's what we advised would be that. Then the remaining 250 that we had already budgeted, then that goes to our basins and other things, the stormwater management. So, it's just keep your fingers crossed.
So it was 300,000, just double checking that was the number. That's correct.
And then in theory, that's supposed to come in basically annually, right? It's not a one-time thing. So the idea would be between working with the state, getting this MSD funding coming in, and then the city putting some money in every year, but then also, we haven't done this yet, but there has been some beginning conversations about when would it be appropriate to dip into our rather extensive reserve in some of these projects and what to do. So there's a couple different funding options that we have. Our whole goal with this is to get everything as ready to go as we can so that when money starts hitting from wherever, we can start moving stuff, which would be great.
So just one last, any of you, city engineer. This work that they have done, I get the strong impression that you are pretty well satisfied with what you have seen and what they've done. Enough for me to believe, as a member that says, I see this as a pretty clear path. I don't see any flaws. I don't see any tripwires for what we're intending to do. So with that with saying that, then the go-ahead would be the go-ahead. And personally, from my point of view on the committee, is that I trust that judgment, and I trust that you feel that you have seen from an engineering and a development point of view, that it's a good way to go. So for me, if you think that all the ducks are in a row, and I'm not trying to take your thing, if you think all the ducks are in the row, then I think we need to just move forward with that. I mean, you know, they keep talking about if the horse is dead, it's time to dismount, you know, and you know, we've been beating a dead horse for a while, not, you know, for a few years, and I'm even a late starter for this. So, okay, you've got me clarified. If I see your guys' stamp of approval on this, then I'm, you know, certainly willing as a member to say, let's move.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Yep, just based on Mr. Oak's comments, because I think that those of us that have been here since the beginning of the committee, I mean, we forget that everyone else hasn't been able to access information or absorb it at the same rate. And so he shed some light on that with his comments. So I think it would be helpful on the engineering report if there could be a couple of sentences in the introduction referencing the previous basin study that we did of all the basins and how we got to this as the task issued by the department. And that his comments also clarified to me what I would expect at council, and they will have the same, you know, questions because I doubt they've been following it as closely too. So it would just maybe make the path a little smoother. Adding and a general public, if they just read that particular meeting attachment and not another one, that would just help.
Anybody have anything else on it? I just had two quick things, Joe. And this, I'm not an engineer, so maybe I'm the only one here that's not getting this. In this, right on page 6, where they talk about the storage depth. I'm assuming this is the elevation that they're talking about and not the actual depth of the pool, where they're saying elevation 615 permanent pool. Period. I assume that's elevation. And then 621 for the flood pool. I'm just trying to think of when we, not that we have to necessarily go out to the residents, but to just give people an understanding of what we're talking about. Explaining like this pond is 4 feet deep, and when it floods, it's 6.5 feet deep or whatever it is. That would be helpful. And then also when we're talking about storage volume, I think it's important for people to understand, let's say it's 2 feet of water over 2.3 acres. I imagine that is a lot of water. And so it would be good, I think, to say, hey, normally this holds 457,000 cubic feet of water. During one of these storms, it is whatever it is.
600,000.
Yeah.
Whatever the math comes out to, I don't care, but that would be, I think, important for people to realize, because one of the things at least when I'm out, people really don't think about like how much water comes off of their house at a storm. And when you're seeing it's hundreds of thousands of gallons or whatever it is that are winding up in a pond, it's a much clearer picture for people. And then the last thing I would suggest, if we can do it, and I just know this based on the other two guys that are they're trustees with me over there. If we could, like, when I'm reading this thing and I'm seeing like, you know, putting rock around it and clearing the banks and all that, I think I understand what that is, but if we could just have some type of like a general visual reference of what that's going to look like, because the people around these ponds, not that they necessarily get a choice whether this is gonna happen or not, but it would be much more helpful if it was like, hey, it's gonna be this kind of rip-rack rock, whatever we're putting in there, you know, just to help explain what's happening.
I think I agree in terms of the terms that are used. You know, they use terms that they're very familiar with in terms of what all that is and what it looks like and so on, but as a layperson, that's a little bit of a struggle, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, technically, I guess I should be a lot more than a layperson now. Like, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I know what this is, but if they could just have like a very plain language and some pictures, that would be ideal. Like, so they got the ones of what it looks like now, and just to say, hey, we're gonna put this piece of, whatever they're doing, or put this piece of concrete in there and that holds this water for this much more time. That'd be great. But other than that, I think that this is super comprehensive and very, very good. I think it is in here. The other thing that I think would be good is, if it's possible to, I know they had a couple like neighborhoods encircled in here. If they could really try to define where the water is coming from as compared to like, it's generally around here. Like because I am the trustee over there, I know this, like, there are 3 houses in the subdivision of West Glen Farms that feed into that pond. That's it. Everybody, so this water comes from everybody else. And then like, I know for us, and I'm sure other neighborhoods will do the same thing, you know, we're spending 7-8 grand a year to try to make something look pretty and save it, that we don't have anything to do with. So anything like that can really kind of try to define a little bit more where this stuff is coming from, I think would be super helpful. And then as we talked about with our bigger stormwater plan, you know, having people understand that this water comes from these, you know, 1,200 houses or whatever it is. And then it feeds into the pond, the creek here, and then it affects this many houses down the way. Those kinds of very simple terms, I think, help people to understand the scope of what's going on. Yes, sir.
Just as some examples to Joe's point, there's a number of things here that sent me running to the internet. RCN, right? Runoff curve number. That's apparently a pretty important number. I don't know what the hell it is. Then there's some others that I think I do know, but you know, not well enough to stake my life on it. A flume, a weir wall, a boulder, as opposed to a rear wolf, you know. But a weir wall, a boulder drop structure, and an H structure seem to be things they like to talk about. That I'm not sure what they.
Yeah, a Newberry style boulder drop structure.
Best kind out there.
Would be.
It's the best kind out there.
I can't imagine there could be a better one.
And also to Joe's point, in terms of making this something that is, you know, relatable for people, is it possible to take something like the runoff curve number and take that and say, well, with this runoff curve number, if we can achieve that, we will have any water event that we've had since Wildwood was founded, we can handle easily, something like that, or in the last recorded history.
Well, we know we can't handle every storm. Nothing's designed to accommodate that range, particularly with the storms we're getting of late. They basically they overwhelm even the best attempts of the engineering process, I think.
I understand that, but can we relate it to past storms and say, this will handle anything that we've had since Wildwood was founded? Is that?
We can certainly ask them to that, but again, the best example I can use is, and I believe this to be the case, and please correct me, and we were approving Deer Birch Town Center. We had a long discussion with the representative of Deer Birch Market about the size of their parking lot and the number of parking spaces, knowing that for the most part, they want their parking spaces for about 2 days out of the year, sometime around Thanksgiving and sometime around Christmas. The rest of the time, they pretty much sit idle. Kind of the same philosophy here is you can't design for that 500-year storm.
Absolutely.
So, but I'll see what I can do, and the benefit to us recording this as well is I may try to explain it, but I can always reference them to the video and have them listen to the conversation.
It might, I mean, I don't know if they can, I don't know if it's possible to do this math, but I'm thinking that, I think it was that storm we had like 2 summers ago that was
2019.
insane.
Yep.
Just a rough math model of like, this is what that storm was in terms of like what it, you know, might have done here. I know the numbers aren't going to be exact, but that kind of might help people. I mean, that was a pretty big storm. People really will remember that. And so to say, you know, it's not gonna, I mean, nothing is going to, we aren't planning on things like that necessarily. Nothing's gonna fix the 1,000-year storm. But, you know, when we get these insane downpours for, you know, we get 4 inches of rain in an hour and a half, like there's nothing anybody can do, but we gotta plan ahead. All right, do you guys have what you need from us in terms of that?
Good comments, and we'll get them to Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Wagner, and we'll get them on their way.
Perfect. All right. Updates on our projects.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the task force, really, I've got two updates for you. First, we'll be talking more about Evergreen Forest Court and Highlands at Wild Horse in closed session, so I'll leave that till then. And I did yesterday get an email from Dr. Jessica Leroy with the United States Geological Survey. And according to her, the report has finished editorial review and is in the queue to be reviewed by our center's report specialist. After her review and approval, there is a final review by the Office of Science, Quality and Integrity, and then the final layout will be produced. So they're still kind of working through their scientific review process. But we are getting closer and closer each month.
That's what we paid for, so we're excited to see it.
Initially, I think some of the quick conclusions of the study is more storage is good to hold water, as Mr. Brown mentioned, longer, keep it out of the channel during those high storm events. And the armoring of certain areas is almost incumbent because there's no other solution.
If I'm remembering right, there was some, I mean, we have this task force, so we are aware that there's an issue, but there were a couple of things I think they were finding in their kind of initial stuff that like what we thought was bad is much worse than it was.
Yes.
Than we thought.
Yeah.
And happening much faster. So that's kind of started to speed this process up a little bit because we knew it wasn't great and it's worse than we thought it was.
Yeah, and that was unfortunate.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a thought that keeps me up at night, so to speak, sometimes literally. So I'm a worry wart, so others don't have to. I'll take all your worries for you. But you know, I'm excited that we're making progress on, you know, the retention basins and Evergreen and Highlands. But I keep focusing on what Dr. Hammer really taught us at the beginning of the process and where our obligations perhaps are ordered first as a city. And that would be back to the triple meander. And I'm concerned that as an organization of volunteers that have changed over time, that maybe we've lost the plot on that as a priority. What I was always taught was that triple meander had the ability, if it was addressed first, would help other projects hold their structural integrity and would give us more bang for the buck. And then that is the area that we own as a city outright. So it's our property we legally have to maintain versus the Highlands is quasi-public, Evergreens is completely private. And so I realize it's got a big sticker shock price value or would, but when I go back to what's the worst area in the city and the fact that we own it and it's not on our, you know, our major project list as first, it gives me heartburn because I spent a lot of time telling my residents what I was told at the Highlands back then, which was we would really like to do the triple meander before we do you because we know it's going to affect your project area. And then that moved forward because it was lower ticket. And so I'm hopeful that as this USGS study comes out, even though, yes, we don't have our complete master plan done or even really truly started, that maybe we would be eligible for other types of grants because we've done an additional study with the federal government to demonstrate need. And I also think that we do have it, and there's certainly more infrastructure grants through the bipartisan act than there were when we initially started talking about it. So there are other doors that have opened that we just maybe haven't had the time to explore. And I cannot speak for the new council members. I just don't, you know all of them well enough. But I think with a lot of my colleagues that they are so well aware of the need in the city that I'm not sure that there would be a whole lot of fight if we did need to deficit spend. And I think that, you know, or out of savings essentially. And I think you can make a much better argument for maintaining the property that you own, that you have an obligation to as a city than deficit spending or savings spending rather, or maybe other projects that could have a public-private partnership. And so I just want to make sure that we put that, back on the agenda. And while we're talking with these firms about estimates for other issues, that we start to bring the triple meander back in, because I really want to be able to ask for money for that and have that in the pipeline. And if we don't have an estimate on the work project, so, I don't, if it's appropriate to do a formal motion, or if you want that, I'd love to see it show up back on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we need a formal one.
Yeah.
Basically, so Mr. Oaks, just to get you up to speed a little bit on this, the triple meander is sort of this S-shaped curve, basically at Clayton and Strecker. It is very, very bad. Very bad.
Really bad.
And for most of our projects that we've identified, it's, let's say, several $100,000s to fix each of these projects. When we kind of did our cost estimates for the triple meander at the time, it was, I would say, $3 to $4 million. For just that, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's probably gonna be closer to 5 to 6 at this point, just based on inflation and everything else. So it's very, very expensive. It is the most dangerous spot. It is affects, infrastructure down the road, bridges and things like that. We've kind of taken this thing because it has taken so long to get any projects going.
Right.
We started to take what we can get with some of these things, with the hopes that we're gonna be able to go get magic money from somewhere to fix this triple meander. I agree with Ms. Edens. I'm not a huge fan of waiting around forever to get this done, because every one of these storms we have is another chance that it gets punched through or something bad happens. So
Does the study indicate at all what impact these things have on mitigating the problem with it?
in theory, it will help.
Slow it down.
It'll slow it down. So basic,
Fix it.
it'll still need to be fixed. And what we are trying to avoid is, like, one of our projects is beyond the downriver
Downstream.
from the triple meander. And so in theory, if we were to, when we fix that, if we then don't fix the things upstream relatively soon, that fix becomes unfixed very quickly, because this water just doesn't stop. And I also agree with Lauren. I don't know our new council members particularly well yet either, but I know once our internet project kind of got completed and we're moving into phase 2 on that, our watershed issue is now at the top of the list of things to do. So, it'll take some tough conversations for sure. And, happy to have them with our new mayor and our colleagues, and we'll see if we can get something figured out. But the triple meander for me is still the #1 project. It's just, we don't want to let this stuff, $200,000 here and there. It takes a long time to get to $5 million. So hopefully we can figure something out. All right, anything else?
Just one thing on the
Yes, sir.
triple meander part, please.
Well, I was just gonna say, so I'm not sure how. Because we're not we're not a school district, or we're a separate district that has a form of property tax. We're not that, but I don't know if there is a way to even issue like some sort of obligation bond. That's temporary for capital projects like this. As a municipality, I will say I have learned from Monarch, because we were talking about what's an appropriate amount at the council level to have in reserve funding, that separate from any state requirement for operating budget percentage, it's like roughly, I think they said like 40 to 44% was the recommended amount for a AAA credit rating for bond. So it's a much higher amount that they keep in reserves to have a better bond rate. So if this is something that we can do for a project, then council needs to also have that discussion before they just decide that we don't need a lot of money in reserves if it can, affect bond ratings. Interest.
Yeah, and if that's even something.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it is legally, but I feel a little bit like we're heading as a council towards being, a condo board in Florida that doesn't fix the foundation and the building collapses. But we spent a lot of money making sure the carpet was replaced. And I just want to make sure that we're really minding the fort, because I believe that we have enough information to adequately explain, why if we can't get money that we're gonna go to the residents and say, you know, we're spending $4 million. I think I can make an ecological and public safety argument. I just want to make sure that having the argument is an agenda item and where it's not falling through the cracks.
Just my one thought on the triple meander, that was the other permit application the task force recommended be submitted to the Corps of Engineer.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
And so we submitted 3: Evergreen Forest, Court, the Highlands of Wild Horse, and Triple Meander, and all 3 got approved. So they're in waiting. So we've done one step toward the Triple Meander. Again, it was just a matter of, as
Picking
Mr. Farmer
battles.
so elegantly said, it was just a lot of money.
All right. Work program, do we have anything on that? Not really.
If there's any questions, all of us are here to try to answer them for you.
All right, we'll get to that here. Anything else anybody wants to discuss before we do our little closed session? All right. I assume we need to read the red notice. All right. Closed meeting notice. Notice is hereby given that the Wildwood Erosion Task Force will hold a closed meeting at the place and time listed above, which is right now. For the purpose of considering with matters related to the following sealed bids and related documents, until the bids are opened and sealed proposals and related documents or any documents related to a negotiated contract until a contract is executed or all proposals are rejected. This would be under RSMO 610.021 parentheses 12. All right, do we need to like shut the Zooms down?
We'll go into the other room.
We're gonna go in the other room.
We need a motion.
Yep.
Oh, yeah,
A second.
got it.
Go
And
into
a roll
closed
call.
session, then a roll.
Who would care to make the motion to go into executive session? Mr. Sermon, seconded by Mr. Patton. All right, roll call vote.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
member Delante,
Yes.
member Oaks,
Sure.
member Sturman,
Yes.
member Patton,
Yes.
member Scher is no longer with us on the Zoom, Chair Farmer.
Yes.
Need your manila envelope.
I have envelopes for you that you'll get when we get in there.
All right, so we will return to the Zoom here in a little bit. Travis, you're gonna put the screen up. All right, we'll be back shortly, Melanie. I hope you're enjoying the show. We'll be back as soon as we can. All right.
That's an extra.
All right, Travis, tell me when you're ready.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, we are back. If anybody, if somebody have anything else they want to add before we perhaps adjourn for the evening? Right, and all we need is a motion to adjourn. Stevens make the motion, Mr. Sturman seconds it, non-debatable, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Motion passes. So we are adjourned. Our next meeting will be to be determined. We will let you guys all know. We've got some fun work to do, so it'll be sooner rather than later, I imagine.
I like to think we'll have it before the 4th of July holiday, so maybe about 4 to 5 weeks from now.
All right,
But we'll keep you in the loop as best we can when we get an understanding of what we can bring to you. Obviously, it'll be something with Todd Wagner and Joe Wilson. I'm hoping to have something on the USGS study by then. And then if we're lucky, we'll have maybe some information for you. Our discussion tonight, closed session.
all right. Well, thank you.